Good evening, and welcome once again to the Shadow Gallery, a special edition, mind you, of the Shadow Gallery. I am, as always, your host, James Donnelly. And tonight, this is a special edition, as I said, because we are going to be talking about we're going to be doing a series of 3 videos, and this is post the first 4 Batman films, which I did on this channel, which you'll be able to find. I will post a link to the playlist below so that you can watch them and tell me what you think. As you can see from specifically from the 1989, the first Batman film, the Tim Burton Batman film, you'll see that there's a shitload of trolls there. And it's a lot of fun to read through that because it's just very entertaining to see so much idiocy at work. So anyway, and of course this being my Movie Masters edition of the Bat Pod, and my Movie Masters edition of the Batman Dark Knight figure. But tonight, if we're going to start off, we're going to begin with Batman Begins. Now, we know the story of this film, but we're going to talk about why it's, well, at that point in time, was arguably the best superhero film ever made. Now, so this is back in 2005, seeing the trailers, I was very, very excited because it seemed like this was somebody who really understood Batman and wanted to really build a story from the ground up. Because in 1989's Batman, okay, let's cut this shit. Okay, so the first 4 films of the only one, it takes 3 films, takes till Batman Forever to explain why Bruce Wayne dresses up as a giant bat. And it's this, it's a kind of sort of, homage to, either Batman Year One or Batman The Dark Knight Returns, whichever you want to say, because they both, specifically have that moment where the bats, where they come face to face with the bat. And the first one is just, in the Burton film, explain, well, they're great survivors. And that's it. That's the only explanation you get. But here we see, okay, Bruce Wayne, this is definitely what Nolan did was, what Nolan and David Goyer did, as far as, from script standpoint was concerned, they constructed it in a way that allows us to follow the life of Bruce Wayne before he becomes Batman. So let's first talk about that structure and why it works. Because the first thing that we see is Bruce Wayne as a young man, as a young child, falling through the grate and into the kind of very top of the cave that is underneath Wayne Manor, and he is attacked by the bats. And then we see, then that flashes forward to him kind of reliving that nightmare. That's one of the nightmares that he has about the bats attacking him. And we see how he deals with that as he joins the League of Shadows and so on and so forth, and is taught by Ducard and Ra's al Ghul, and then we, once, he decides that the reason that he must be different from criminals, because killers will kill. And he wants to dispense justice, but he is not willing to forfeit his soul in doing so, and chooses not to kill, even when he's basically being told you have to, by Raz and by Ducard. And then we finally get to, and this is, so then we finally get to a point where we see the bat fixation continue through the film, And then basically we have, once we come out of the other side, this is why Bruce Wayne has decided to become Batman. Now, this movie borrows very heavily from elements of Batman The Dark Knight Returns, but of course most specifically Batman Year One. Now, the reason that they didn't just make Year One into a film is because that would have been, I mean, it's a great comic, but it'd be probably a pretty dull film. Because when you're going to see a Batman film, you expect to see him battle villains. Now, watching Batman beat the snot out of a lot of street scum and helping Jim Gordon clean up the corrupt Gotham police force, yes, I mean that's like a great, like kind of, The Wire, Breaking Bad, kind of TV show right there. But it's not very cinematic. So even when they put it on, the Year One, the Batman Year One animated release, it didn't have some of the great big moments that we loved from the comic because a lot of them had been used in elements of Batman Begins. So this is obviously, we have, David Goyer, obviously a big comic book fan, and we have Chris Nolan, who had, at that point in time, done one fantastic film, which was Memento, and we had him do one kind of on the mediocre-ish side English remake of Insomnia, the Swedish film Insomnia, which was a brilliant film when it, in its original form, but it was just kind of weak. But Nolan really directed the hell out of it. So he becomes for some reason this led Warner Brothers to say, this is the guy to do our Batman films, because he has an idea in his head of how he wants it to go. He doesn't want to totally distort the original framework of the character like Tim Burton did, or Joel Schumacher did. He wants to take it and make it more real. He doesn't want flashy supervillains with big guns and just all of this flash and pizzazz. He wants something that's very grounded, very real, and that you could say this can really happen. So now moving on to from a cinematic standpoint, it moves beautifully. Just the way that it's segmented, each act flows very evenly. We have the first act, Bruce training. We have the second act, Bruce becoming Batman. The third act, Bruce confronting the danger that has come to Gotham in the form of Ra's al Ghul and the League of Shadows. The second thing, and perhaps even more important, is the cast. Is that Chris Nolan, coming from a more independent style of filmmaking, he brought with him all of these very kind of independent actors, people who were, they had worked obviously in bigger budgeted films, but where did he find his star? Christian Bale as Batman. First of all, perfect. Okay, it doesn't get much more perfect than Christian Bale as Bruce Wayne and Christian Bale as Batman. He has the look when he's in his civvies, and he's got the momentum when he's in the costume. Michael Caine as Alfred, very inspired. It's a much stronger and much more, it isn't kind of like the Alfred who's just always there to, give, here's a little nudge there, slugger. Not like Michael Gough, which I loved Michael Gough. Actually, he was one of my favorite parts of the original Batman quadrilogy, if you will. But Michael Caine just, he has so much more attitude. He has the attitude that Alfred from the comic book has, and it, Michael Gough did as well. So, but more so. He's a more vital Alfred. We have Liam Neeson as Ducard. We We have, Ken Watanabe from The Last Samurai. Is the only real film that he'd done before that as Ra's al Ghul. We have, Cillian Murphy as Jonathan Crane. We have, Rutger Hauer. We have, Mark Boone Jr. We have Katie Holmes. Easily the biggest mistake they made. I think that was a forced decision. They wanted somebody who had more of a name that would bring in some of the younger crowd, the teenagers, whatnot. But of course, you have Morgan Freeman as Lucius Fox, finally bringing this guy into the fray, and basically he is exactly as he is in the comic. He is, he's the guy that runs Wayne Enterprises, well, eventually becomes the guy that runs Wayne Enterprises, but he's also, a pretty brilliant guy in his own right as far as the manufacturing of, all these prototypes and these things that Batman eventually uses. And then, most especially, you have Gary Oldman as Jim Gordon. And we see his progression and his willingness to... He's not really standing up against the corruption within the Gotham City PD, but he's not part of it. And that's what makes him so special. And ultimately, when we see him there in his first moment with young Bruce after his parents' murder, so I mean, again, it's Linus Roche playing his father, of course, and certainly not to forget, great Tom Wilkinson playing Carmine Falcone. It's just, everybody in it is cast so perfectly, and they're cast in ways that you wouldn't expect. I mean, Gary Oldman doesn't do the button-down kind of, normal guy role too well. This is a guy we're used to seeing playing, like, the lunatic, okay? He's the guy who should be the villain, right? But he's not. He's the great cop. And, we have... And a lot of people... One of the things they bitch about a lot with this film is the fight choreography, that we don't get to see it that much. Well, as Ducard explains when Bruce Wayne first reaches the top of the mountain and comes into the lair of the League of Shadows, when he's doing all of his, different fighting styles, Panther, Tiger, everything like that, he is, Ducard says to him, this is not a dance. And what are we used to seeing? We're used to seeing these beautifully choreographed, great martial arts fight sequences, especially since The Matrix came out. And those are great. I love them. Don't get me wrong. But Batman attacks from the very beginning in a way that you would expect Batman to attack. He doesn't kind of just glide down, slowly stroll over to the unsuspecting thugs. He starts grabbing them one by one and pulling them into doors like it's in a horror movie, okay? And so, I mean, it's just, it's insane what he does and the way that he does it. We don't need to see everything that he does. That's part of the mystery of the Batman. That's why it's so cool. And I love the fact that they do actually refer to him a lot in the film as the Batman, not just as Batman. Obviously, the I'm Batman line, it's a little hackneyed, okay? It doesn't work that well. There are some one-liners, admittedly, they don't work well either. I gotta get me one of those. But I mean, you have, the Tumblr chase. Of course, you have the scene with the bats. I mean, that's kind of the centerpiece of the whole film right there. It's the greatest gag. It's the coolest, most specific allusion to, okay, well, this has actually come from another source, but we're using it because it's like one of the most awesome moments in Batman history. Okay, and it's one of the best on-screen moments of Batman as well. Another thing about the film is its score. Is that it's a much more understated score than the kind of blaring, very, kind of, bombastic Sturm und Drang scores of Danny Elfman, or the kind of, pseudo Danny Elfman kind of wackiness of Elliot Goldenthal. But we have Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard, both excellent composers in their own right, are doing this very kind of low key, this very kind of, it's very much an undercurrent score. But then when it needs to ramp up, it really ramps up. And you have just that simple 2-note, announcement: Batman is here. Obviously, the scene in which he's standing there in the cave, when the first time that Bruce actually goes into the cave as an adult, and there's just he's holding the light, and the bats swarm around him. At first, he is a little scared, but then he just stands up straight and with his eyes closed, just letting the bats flow all around him, and embraces his fear fully. And they have that great moment where it pulls back and you see him, and he's just there, just standing, it's a small figure, and just these bats in this like whirlwind around him. And it's such a great, grand moment, and it does have the right amount of grand music, because it has that two-tone, that 2-note, that that I'm off key there, but you know what I mean. So I mean, we have those moments that are kind of peppered throughout the film, and then you have the film. Admittedly, starts to the kind of romance with Rachel doesn't quite work. And that's really Katie Holmes' fault, because she does not project an idea of, okay, this is a girl who really seems like she's in love with this guy. And another big complaint, of course, about all the Nolan Batman films is Batman's voice, the whole kind of gruff, swear to me! I mean, it's, again, if you read Year One, and the first time that Batman appears and he's fighting the punks with the just stolen the TV and everything like that, he says, and to the right I throw a growl at him that I brought all the way back from Africa. And that, to me, when I heard his voice, I said, okay, this is not just, he's not doing like a Michael Keaton, Val Kilmer kind of rip-off voice, or just merely trying to disguise it. He's using the power of his voice to scare the living shit out of the people that he's confronting. So it's not just as a disguise. It's something that is used as an emotional. It's designed to evoke an emotional response from whoever that he's dealing with, and that response is to be afraid of me. Now, obviously, when he's with people that he doesn't want to be afraid of him, he lowers that timbre, and he starts to speak more quietly, more distinctly, like when he's in his scenes with Jim Gordon. So that's another big problem that people have with it, but I think is perfect. The third act is again, it's great because, and this is why I call it a superhero film, because ultimately, yeah, Batman is a superhero, but he's not Spider-Man, he's not Iron Man, he's not the Avengers, he's not superhuman. Okay, there's nothing about him that really is superhuman. And yes, we do actually get to see his some of his detective work being done here. As far as just the investigations that he does, into exactly what has kind of transpired with following certain leads and so on and so forth. It's not just him being reactive, but we see him use his brain. That's obviously a big that's a big plus. I was going somewhere with this earlier. I had this all very carefully planned out in my head. I knew as soon as I sat down here I was going to start blowing it. But basically, the another major element, again, in the third act, is that it's this whole basically it's this fight to save Gotham from an external threat that is willing to destroy the entire city. And not in a figurative way, but in a quite literal way. So we have this race against time, this pulse-pounding, this pulse-pounding third act in which, confronted by, Roz Ducard at his home, the home is set on fire, he goes, he gets himself all suited up, and of course there's the classic suiting up moments, because that has to happen in every superhero film, or at least I think it does. And then we have, the finale with being in the Narrows, all the cars, and this is where it starts to, it really starts working very well when he starts working with Commissioner Gordon. Ultimately, the idea of Gordon driving the tumbler and, kind of blowing stuff up, it's kind of neat and everything, but I think that there's a way they could have played with that so it didn't require that he does kind of the, scraping up against the cars and stuff like that. Because, it's good for fun, and like I said, it's a good summer film, but it's a good film all around. It's a great film all around. But, and the whole, this kind of epic battle between Batman and Roz, the finale on the train. I mean, it's, you get, Liam Neeson. It was such a revelation to see him in this kind of role, because we're used to seeing him as a good guy, and here he is. He's playing the villain. And not only, and this is another part that the film got right, was that instead of picking automatically, let's go with the most famous. Let's go with some of the most famous Batman villains. No, let's take from year one. Let's take Carmine Falcone, okay? So, here we have the mob boss, okay? And over here, we have the Scarecrow. We have Jonathan Crane. Because the film in itself is in a great deal about fear, about spreading fear, about overcoming fear. From an internal sense, of course, for Bruce Wayne, and then, of course, in an external, in an external way for the entire city. And so that, and then, of course, selecting Ra's al Ghul, which is, to me, he's the greatest Batman villain, because he's the one that can match him thought for thought, blow for blow. It's not, Joker may be the best Batman villain, but Ra's al Ghul is the greatest Batman villain, because he's always been, like I said, he's always been his equal in every way, and sometimes his superior in every way. So it's a very, it's always kind of, there's always this balance between these two characters that is played off very well in this film. So you've got a great structure to the film. You've got a fantastic cast, with the exception, of course, of, Katie Holmes. You've got a great Bruce Wayne, got a great Batman, all in one, and, someone who looks like they can beat the shit out of 20 guys at once when you see him, without a shirt on, and who, when he's in that suit, you get the sense, okay, this guy is, he means business. The tech is a little out there, but it's not too far out there. It's not too futuristic. There's no, it doesn't seem to be like, all these lasers and, there's no bat anti-shark repellent or whatever, but, everything in it is pretty grounded in a sense of reality. Obviously, like I said, it gets a little far out there, and that's really the only film's kind of misstep. But again, this is a superhero film. It's not just, it's not an urban crime story. So, and like I said, performance-wise, Liam Neeson is terrific. Gary Oldman is brilliant. The smaller, Cillian Murphy is awesome. I loved him. And Ken Watanabe, unfortunately, not a lot to do other than just kind of sit there and look and act menacing for about 10 minutes, and to be very physical when he's in a sword fight. We see kind of where the gauntlets come from and everything like that, and again, even Mark Bloom Jr. as Flass. I mean, very convincing. Wilkinson as Carmine Falcone is just he's awesome. And and Morgan Freeman. I mean, there aren't too many films that Morgan Freeman's brought down. He usually brings them up. So, and again, this, from a style standpoint, it's very straightforward. This is more akin to a film like the Marvel films that have come out, where it is, there's, big bad guy, big kind of finale, and not to the kind of more, well, we'll talk about that next time. But I mean, this is easily, it was one of my favorite films of the last decade, and not just because it was a Batman film, but because it was a great film. I mean, it works on every level that it works, that it tries to hit. It hits every point that it needs to for a great origin story. So, by giving us that, by giving the audience that immediate pull in, and still waiting about 40 minutes into the film before we ever even see Batman. I mean, that's, I think some people stayed away because of that, because it wasn't that huge of a moneymaker. It was not, on the scale of, certainly the Avengers, but, on like a lot of the other, recent Marvel films, things like that, where it's, been, north of, either way north or just a little bit south of $200 million, didn't make that much domestically. As far as, from a box office standpoint. But, it's just, I mean, this was, to me, the first time I'd ever really seen Batman on the screen. I mean, I can't, and this is something else that I don't really talk about, and maybe I will. So kind of rewind that, strike that, never mind. That's really it. So these are the reasons that I think that Batman Begins is one of the greatest superhero films ever made, and why I think it was the perfect start to Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy. So we'll be back probably next week with the next film in the series, The Dark Knight. So until then, this is James Donnelly from the Shadow Gallery, reminding you, as always, to stay in the shadows.